Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, this afternoon. This is another one of those tastings that has been sat on the back burner for a while, and I just really wanted to share these whiskies with you guys. So we'll come back to the A to Z of Scotch distilleries in due course. But just like the last couple of episodes, I've kind of deviated away from that. I thought, well, just one more little episode. And what better an episode? Let's do some Japanese whiskey. I love Japanese whiskey, and I know a lot of you guys do. So I thought it was a good opportunity to take a look at the two new releases from Nikka. Now, as you know, Nikka, like a number of distilleries, have decided to go down the route of no age statement bottlings. They obviously feel that demand is outstripping supply. They can't hold on to the stocks for the large range of age statement bottlings that they were producing, and have now basically culled the range to a single bottling, a no age statement Yoshi and a no age statement Miyagi Co. So we'll take a look at those and see how they stack up. I also thought it might be a nice opportunity to show you some other Japanese distilleries that you may well not have heard of. So right, so one of those distilleries, and I've been trying to get the pronunciation of this right all afternoon and tripping over my tongue, so apologies if my pronunciation is pretty rubbish. Shinzou, which was founded in 1985, so we'll be looking at one of their whiskies. We will also be looking at one of the horrendously expensive bottlings of the now defunct Hanyu. Yes, I have a sample of that, and we will get onto that in due course. And we will also be looking at another distillery called, again, hopefully I get the pronunciation of this right, Chichibu, which was founded in 2008. So that's this afternoon's tasting. So basically, a little bit of waffle about the distilleries. So Chichibu is a fairly recent distillery, like I said, built in 2008, although the heritage of the distillery kind of comes from Hanyu and the guy behind Hanyu, one Ichiro Ichiro. I can't. Yeah. Anyway, his family owned Hanyu, and Hanyu dates back to 1941, and when the distillery was closed down, thankfully and probably very cleverly, Ichiro hung. Oh dear me, I'm having a bad day. I think I'll just stick to tasting whiskey. Ichiro hung on. Okay, there. Hung on to obviously the remaining stocks, and I believe from what I've read, there are still stocks of the whiskey available, and he embarked upon releasing these spirits under what he called the House of Deck of Cards range, which I think numbered over 120. I think I'm not entirely sure exactly how many bottlings there were, but I know they're horrendously expensive. I mean, I've had emails offering me these bottlings for an awful lot of money, and anyway, we'll be obviously looking at one of those and seeing if it's worth all the hype at all. But anyway, so going back to Ichiro, he basically set up the Chichibu distillery in 2008, and it's been releasing youngish spirit pretty much ever since. And it will be interesting to see what the spirit is like, as we'll be looking at one of his younger bottlings. And like I said, we will be looking at another distillery. Quickly flipping to the page, Shinzou, which, like I said, was founded in 1985. Although, again, the family behind it have a long association with the Japanese whiskey industry. Initially, the company Hombo Shuzo, great names, aren't they? I mean, you can't pronounce them, but they're great names. Set up as a cotton processing company before moving into whiskey, and the distillery, like I said, was founded in 1985, but closed sort of 7 years later, amidst the early 90s sort of downturn in the sales, and consumption of whiskey. But of course, as we know, whiskey consumption is now well and truly on the rise, and they brought the distillery back on stream. Again, thankfully, they hung on to a lot of old stock, and certainly the first bottling of theirs I tasted a while ago was the Mars Maltage 3+25, which was quite interesting, but we're not looking at that one. We're looking at some of their younger spirit, just to see what the characteristics of it are. So anyway, that's a very, very, very potted history of these two distilleries. Obviously didn't go into Yoshi and Miyagi Co, so I've rabbited about those in the past, and if I did, we'd probably be here till tea time, I imagine. But no, we want to taste some whiskey, don't we? So I'll just get on and introduce the lineup, shall I?
I've stopped thinking about you. I've learned to live without you. I've stopped playing.
Okay, so as I said, we're going to start. We're going to be looking at the two new no age statement bottlings from Nikka. We're going to kick off with the Miyagi Co. As you can see, it's bottled now in a 50 cl bottle, and it is bottled at 43%. As you know, the Yoshi distillery, this one, which is bottled at exactly the same percent and in the same bottle, is the coastal distillery, as it's out near the coast, so it tends to have that sort of more salty kind of character. And obviously Miyagi Co is the inland distillery, so we shall see how they kind of stack up. I've often found Miyagi Co tends to be a little bit more heavy on the sherry, although both distilleries tend to use a proportion of sherry casks in their maturation, so we'll see how they kind of stack up. So, and then we're going to move on to the three, well, not necessarily interesting ones, but the three unknown quantities. Firstly, we'll be looking at the Mars whiskey, Mars Revival Komagatake. This was distilled in 2011, bottled in 2014, thus making it a 3-year-old, bottled at 58.0 in actual fact, 58%. So that will be quite interesting to look at. Then we're going to move on onto two of the Ichiro's malts. We're looking at this one, which is the from the Chichibu, and this is called the Chibidaru, which was distilled in 2010 and bottled in 2014. Now, Chibidaru is, I don't know if it's exactly Japanese for quarter casks, but that's essentially what they are. But they're not the standard quarter casks. Now, most quarter casks are either made to a quarter size, or they're made from broken down larger casks. What Ichiro has done is, instead of doing that, taking staves out and making smaller casks, he's just chopped one in, well, not in half, but in quarter, obviously. Now, I imagine that must be a real bitch, basically, at the end of the day, to kind of then refashion it when you've got staves about yay wide. But the guy's done it, so it'll be interesting to see whether this different type of quarter cask has any bearing on the finished whiskey. And finally, we'll be looking at one of the deck of cards bottlings. This was the last one that was released in 2014, called the Joker. Now, I'll just pick my piece of paper up. Now, this was quite interesting because, like I said, he's got quite an awful lot of stock to play with, and this particular bottling was from a number of casks distilled in 1985, 86, 88, 90, 91 and 2000. It comprises of sherry butts, puncheons, ex-cognac, ex-Madeira hoggies, bourbon casks, and again Chibidaru. It could be a recipe for disaster, to be honest with you. I mean, all those different cask types, but we shall see. I mean, I've come across this before, where I've tasted whiskey that's been aged in a multitude of different casks. One that does spring to mind is the Taiwanese malt, which I'm desperately trying to remember the name of, Cavalan, and one of their standard bottling is aged in a number of different wood types, and that worked amazingly well. So no reason to suggest that this one won't. So anyway, I think it's enough of the waffle, and let's taste some whiskey. Okay, so let's kick off with the Miyagi then. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. instantaneously you can tell that the spirit is a lot younger. It's got a little bit more high-toned kind of character, but it's a lot of wood, a lot of sherry, sort of dried fruits, obviously prune, walnuts, but I'm getting some nice barley coming through, a little bit of citrus. It's a nicely balanced whiskey. It's got the robust sherry element, but it's got a nice crisp, fresh kind of character. Obviously that element, you know, is because the spirit is a lot younger. I mean, obviously, I would guess the bulk of this is probably going to be in the sort of 6 to 8 years old range, I would have thought. There's probably a little bit of older spirit, which is kind of giving it a bit of basis, a bit of weight. But it's pleasant. It's a lovely, crisp, balanced, fresh nose. And I must admit, sort of Miyagikyo from memory tended to be a lot more heavy, a lot more weightier, a lot more about the dried fruits, and Yoshi tended to be a little bit more sort of, you know, fresh, and obviously the saltiness of the coastal character would often give it that kind of freshness. But no, this is pleasant. This is really nice. Palate. That's more Miyagi. Big, rich, sherried, treacle, dark fruits, coffee, chocolate. But again, certainly finishes with that sort of fresher spirit character, a little bit of barley, although I can still feel the treacle notes kind of lingering. And so again, it's really well balanced. Nice amount of spice coming through on the finish. Obviously, again, it tastes a lot younger than, say, the 10 or the old 12-year-old, which is to be expected, but maybe it's not quite as long, and you could argue that, but I still think that the balance is really, really good. Like I said, that sort of that freshness of the younger malt has certainly kind of balanced up the richer sherry components, and yeah, okay, like I said, maybe it's not quite so long, but I still think that's you know, very, very good whiskey.
Can't you see that you make nothing just an empty.
Okay, so moving on to the Yoshi. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? A lot lighter, as expected. Dare I say it, a little bit more elegant. Some obvious, almost perfumed barley. Some light sherry, almost kind of refill sherry. It's not thick and treacly, it's just kind of giving a delicate, sort of slightly nutty sweetness, a little bit of honey. There's a nice salty character to it, as you would expect. Some lemon, bit of almost lemon rind as well. Plenty of barley, lovely freshness, really elegant. But lots of character, really very, very nice. And I've always kind of, well, not necessarily preferred, but I've always, if you were to say which one of the two I tend to be drawn more to, it tends to be Yoshi. Palate? That's a lovely finish. A little bit more peat noticeable than on the Miyagikyo. There was certainly a little bit of peat there, but not as heavy on the sherry. I'm getting more American oak character, sweet barley, but I'm getting more of the peat, more of the softly sooty kind of peat. Don't get any real medicinal notes or anything like that. It's got some honey, some barley, again a nice kind of light citrusy note. I like that. I think that is really very, very good. Again, yes, it's a little bit on the short side, and you certainly get the youthfulness of the spirit coming through at the finish, but it's got a little bit of spice to it, and like I said, there's a little bit more peat noticeable. A little bit of coffee as well, you know, so there's obviously a little bit of a sherry character to it. Maybe they've decided to sort of like tone down the sherry character on the Yoshi, but then from memory, Yoshi never had quite the sort of big sherry character that Miyagikyo had, so it allowed the sort of the elegance maybe of the spirit and the slight coastal character to sort of come through a little bit more, and I think it certainly does in that. And yeah, I don't think it's a bad bottling at all. Neither of them you can really compare to the older age statement bottlings they used to release, because that's just really unfair, because they're completely different animals. But I still think yeah, really good.
Come here, my boy, and try to take a chance.
Okay, and let's move on to the Shinzou, or the Mars Revival. So this is 3 years old, so it's obviously their current spirit. Let's see what characteristics it has, shall we? Quite oily, as you would expect. Some nice barley. There's a resiny note. It sort of reminds me of Mizunara oak, with that slight resiny kind of spiciness, but it's got an almost kind of French oak grainy kind of character. It's a little bit neutral, not going to lie about that. There's a little bit of smoke. You get a feeling of fruit, but this is kind of a nascent kind of fruit. Not really quite developed, but sort of citrusy, and it's there slightly in the background. It's got some nice warmth to it. There's some warmer spices coming through, some sweeter spices. And maybe a little bit of ester, a little touch of banana possibly. And now I'm starting to get some creamy American oak, which is starting to sort of get a little bit toffeed, which I guess you would expect. So the spirit is relatively light. It's not got a huge amount of character. There's obviously some kind of a lot of wood notes happening, but it's good, clean spirit. It seems to be good. Palate. Very dry finish, which is kind of the combination of the alcohol and the wood tannins. But it does have quite a nice dusty, slightly sort of coal smoky kind of finish to it. A bit spicy as well. Again, a lot of oak. I'm not getting the creaminess of the American oak. I'm certainly getting the kind of hard, grainy kind of character that I would expect from, say, French oak, for example. Which they may have used some, possibly. Again, there was a light resin character, but there's some nice soft citrus fruits. Again, a little bit of esteriness, just a smidge of pineapple, possibly. Yeah, that's interesting, and I guess it's not cheap. I think I saw it. Someone mentioned it was 3 figures somewhere, which is probably an awful lot for what it actually is. But again, like a lot of these new start-up distilleries, you're kind of paying for the exclusivity of it, and it's obviously kind of work in progress. So I think it shows that the spirit is really interesting. It's got some nice citric character to it, but it's just not there yet. It needs some more time. It's not unpleasant to drink. It's not like it's so fainty and off the still like that. It's pretty awful. It's a pleasant whiskey, but just needs a bit more time, I think. Okay, so let's move on to the first of Ichiro's 2 whiskies. This is obviously the 4-year-old, the Chibidaru. Let's look at the colour on that, will you? I mean, that has taken some serious colour from the oak in 4 years. I mean, that is amazing. I mean, so maybe that'll give us a hint to what it's going to be like. But anyway, let's see what it's like. Like the Mars to a certain extent, it has that oily slightly citric character, a lot more wood. I mean, lots and lots of wood, herbal, almost sherried notes. Again, it's got a tightness to it, which would seem to indicate European oak. But there's some nice honey. There's softness to it as well. I mean, yes, I guess you kind of, to a certain extent, you have to kind of blank out all the wood character, but it's got some nice barley. Again, some slight coffee, some sweet apricot, almost kind of conserve, almost apricot conserve. But the alcohol and certainly the wood notes are stopping it from becoming really, really sweet. But like I said, there's a lot of wood notes here, I can tell you. But it doesn't feel forced. I mean, the thing with the quarter cask aging is that sometimes the wood notes can feel, to a certain extent, slightly artificial, like it's been forced, which is essentially what it has. And you're aging it in these quarter casks to kind of push forward the oak character, push forward the maturation, and you can certainly smell it's a young spirit. That it's you know not really out of its nappy to a certain extent, but yeah, it's got some real interest. But it's quite weighty. It kind of starts off with some nice barley, again that slight apricot note, but the wood kind of comes in really quickly. Not overly tannic, quite tight, quite drying. It's got a really interesting kind of almost cold tea kind of character, tea leaves, kind of slight leafiness to it, but sort of dried leaves, maybe dried tobacco, soft spice. Again, a lot of oak character, a lot of not necessarily overt oak character, but a lot of sort of, and again, not quite spice oak, but soft tannins, and you can feel it. It's drying. It's very intense. It's really quite impressive. It has to be said. In that kind of way, you know, you sort of taste it and go, ooh, yeah, that's not bad at all. And you think, what's this spirit going to be like in sort of 5-10 years time, aged in normal sized casks, and you kind of get an inkling that the spirit is quite full in character. It's quite honeyed. It's got some richness to it. It's got some depth, some weight, and I think I would like to see it with a few more years on the clock in larger casks, so that the oak is not quite so aggressive. But I think from that, I think that's going to be some really good stuff. And finally, on to the Hanyu, the Joker. Is this going to be the Joker in the pack? We shall certainly find out. And let's see what the nose gives us with all these different cask types, then, shall we? Now, there's an exercise in wood, it has to be said. You got the richness, the dark, the treacliness, treacly character of the sherry casks. It's got some tight French oak, some dried fruits, not just the raisinated sherry fruits, but the slightly higher tone, slightly sweeter cognac-y kind of notes. It's got a biscuity character, a little bit of biscuits, which I would guess is probably coming from the Madeira. But there's a lot of sherry, a lot of rich sherry, but it's just balanced sublimely. You just keep smelling all these different oak types. I mean, there's no spirit character. You wouldn't expect any spirit character with all those different types of casks, but it has that dusty, aged sherry character, the slight Armagnac-y kind of rancio of dried fruits and oxidation. Oh, but the spices are absolutely gorgeous. Oh, it's rich, dark honey, treacle. Oh, but all the time you've got this vibrant French oak character, these grainy tannins that are, oh, unbelievable stuff. And it just goes to show that you know, I do bang on about, you know, the fact that I want distillery character, yada yada yada, but every now and again you get a whiskey that just kind of like blows that sort of thing out of the water. And again, the complexity is coming from the different types of cask. And so kind of one's purest hat, shall we say, kind of goes out the window, and you just go, yeah, I know there's no distillery character, but you know, and wow, God, that's bloody good. Again, it's lots of sherry, like I said, but you're just getting all the other wood notes. You just pick them up, and it's just really well balanced. And it could have been OTT on the sherry, but palate. Wow. Oh my God. That is sensational. It glides. Yep, there's a lot of a treacly sherry character up first, the sort of like the dried fruit rancio, the oxidation, but it sort of moves through and getting a bit of the biscuitiness on the finish, a little bit of the Madeira notes, some lovely coal dust and peat smoke, little bit of spiciness from the French oak, that sort of intensity, that graininess, a little bit of soft American oak, a little bit of vanilla, and it's all just kind of like moulding into one, but it kind of progresses really nicely. It starts off with a lot of the sherry character and just moves through, so, and you're ending on the sort of the more cognac-y and American oak kind of notes, and a little bit of peat and that sort of dusty spice, a little bit of violet. Wow. Wow, big wow. I mean, no wonder this stuff is going for serious money. That's really, really impressive. And like I said, I mean, you're looking at sort of casks, you know, between, what, 15, 20 odd years of age. And I imagine it's the sherry casks that are probably the oldest components of this particular vatting, because it certainly has that aged sherry character, that sort of old dried fruit, the slightly leathery notes, the slightly tobacco-y kind of notes. But wow, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, I know, I mean, this will be the one and only time, excuse me, that I'll ever get the opportunity to taste this kind of stuff, and I dare say there'll be a number of you that probably won't ever get the opportunity, but I can assure you that that's bloody good. That's amazing. Right, okay, so let's sum this little tasting up. Really interesting stuff. Okay, so the two Nikka bottlings, yeah, alright, they're not as old as previous bottlings, yes, we know that, and you have to accept that, but, you know, they're not bad. I mean, I love them. I mean, I'd quite happily sell either of these two, depending on obviously which your preference is. I mean, maybe I kind of like go a little bit more for the Yoshi, the slightly less sherry notes, slightly elegant character, you know, with the little bit of coastal. That's possibly more my cup of tea. But the Miyagi Co certainly ticks all the right boxes. So the Mars whiskey. Well, I think the spirit is very, very good. There's obviously nothing wrong with that. I just, like a lot of these distilleries, I just think it needs a little bit more time to develop. It's all right, you know, getting your product out on the market as soon as you possibly can. Although in saying that, as you know, the distillery has some aged stocks, which it has indeed released before. So it would be nice to see something with a bit more age. But you know, that's the way these things are. Onto the Chibidaru. just drink some whiskey and you can't talk anymore, can you? Or you certainly can't pronounce Japanese words. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Yeah, like I say, I think I'd like to see it aged in a proper American oak cask and bottled in about sort of 5 or 10 years, just to see what the spirit character is all about, because there was a lot of oak. I mean, it certainly wasn't a bad whiskey, but yeah, like that was good. So yeah, and the Joker. Certainly no Joker, as we said. Sublime whiskey, stunning stuff. Absolutely, I just can't go on about how bloody good it actually was. So let's just leave it at that and just say, yeah, that's damn good. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. I haven't got a clue what I'll be doing next week, but I'll be tasting some whiskey, I imagine. Well, it is a whiskey tasting show after all. So anyway, go get yourself a bottle of Japanese whiskey. Go get yourself a no-age statement bottling of the two Nikkas. They are really good. So yeah, so good drumming, and this is all mine.